So I saw Philip DeFranco, who's one of the biggest YouTubers on the whole website, talking about this, talking about people getting banned and saying, look, even despite your views, this is kind of a big deal. People like Nick Monroe, who is not, I don't believe, a very right-wing person reporting on this. Tim Pool talking about it. He's actually a left-wing progressive. So you have a lot of people that are in the left and the middle, thank God, who are bringing attention to this and saying, hey, look, we don't even agree with these guys, but even if you want to have a democracy or a free society, you should be concerned that political dissent isn't even allowed in the country anymore. And maybe the government's not the one doing the enforcing, but maybe there are institutions more powerful, like Google, and Facebook, so maybe we should talk about it. But what's blackpilling to me is all the response on the right. I see countless conservatarians, libertarians, conservatives, and the issue that they have with what has gone on today is two things. Either one, their issue is Louis Farrakhan. I say, well, Louis Farrakhan got lumped in with right-wing people, but Louis Farrakhan is an anti-Semite, and there's nothing right-wing about anti-Semitism. Oh, you're lumping in Louis Farrakhan with the right wing? But he's not part of it. It's like, what are you, an idiot? We're going up against Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Google, and you're concerned that people are going to lump in this fringe preacher from the Nation of Islam with us, the right wing. Oh, come on. So they're either preoccupied with this, and I see this even with all these alt-right fags. Well, please don't call us anti-Semitic. Please, he's left-wing. Okay, thank you. You're of no help. And then on the other side, you've got all the conservatarians and libertarians. I see some bimbo from the Washington Examiner, who I was tweeting at, saying, dear conservatives, do you really want the government to regulate social media? Because what if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez became president and she was regulating social media? Does it really even matter at this point? Everybody that's doing the regulating now is from Silicon Valley, and they're all liberal, and 20% of the people who work at Google are transgender. So is that the worst case scenario, that, we're going to get left-wing people in government regulating? The people that run the platforms are all left-wing and believe this stuff. What difference does it make? And anyway, then she goes on to say, well, you know how we really combat this? Of course, government. Government doesn't make anything better. Government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem. Oh, wow. Thank you so much, sweetheart. Wow, that's so great. That's wonderful. Did you hear that, from your father with his Brooks Brothers tie when you're going to the think tanks and all that? That's really groundbreaking stuff. Wow, I'm so glad we brought women into the conservative movement. Can we hold more of these women's leadership summits for TPUSA? They're just off the charts brilliant with this kind of stuff. So first they say, well, government's not the problem. The government is not the solution. Government is the problem. It doesn't make things better. It only makes things worse. And then they say, this is the icing on the cake. This is when I start getting out the Nerf guns. Because then they say, well, you know how you could really fight it? Why don't you diversify your news digest? Why don't you sign up for a newsletter? Why don't you join Patreon? Join Patreon. Wow, that's a great idea. You mean Patreon, who MasterCard went in and forced them to shut down Robert Spencer, or Patreon, who changed their terms of services so that they could deplatform a liberal, Sargon of Akkad? Or a newsletter. Yeah, why don't we just go back to magazines? The left will have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Google, and we'll have newsletters. We will have paper newsletters. Yeah, we just have to go back to magazines. Rather than get the government involved in a social media platform being weaponized by the political left with 1.6 billion people, rather than vie for control or even fairness on that platform, no, you're right. We should just go back to stuffing mailboxes with our manifestos. Let me just ride my bike up and down Mannheim Road and stuff my leaflet in somebody's mailbox. That's a great idea, you dumb idiot. So that's these are the two sides on the conservative side. And it's like, you wonder why we are where we are. You wonder why you see the homosexual parade walking down the street and transgender story times or the drag queen story times. And you wonder why you see we're just at war everywhere all at the same time. And nobody's allowed online anymore. Nobody's allowed to have a debit card anymore and all that. Because every time something like this happens, the conservative argument is always passivity. It's never action. Because government is action and government is force. Well, you know what? We have to use force. We have to compete for these institutions. You don't get to live in a country where the government is just constantly holding everybody in a fixed position and it's totally static. The government is the most powerful. The private sector is a very powerful institution. If you don't occupy these fields and are not constantly and perpetually fighting for control or supremacy in them, somebody else is, and they're going to not leave you alone. So you might like to say, oh, well, the government is a big threat to liberty. Well, how's that really going to work out when you're not allowed to voice political dissent? How's that going to work in a democracy when the Democrats are going to control all the chambers of Congress and the executive branch, and they control all the news media and all the social media? How is that a recipe that we're ever going to live in a free society? So I see the conservatives, you're useless. You're a bigger problem than the left, actually, because both sides are basically okay with this, is what you're saying. Left is cheering it on. The right wants to do nothing, so they might as well be cheering it on. So they're useless.